Delta 2648, descend maintain 7000.
Alright, descend to 7000, Delta 2648.
Boy 3130, reduce speed to 210.
210 speed, envoy 3130.
Alright, United 887, approaching the bridge for 2 left.
United 887, San Francisco Chairwing, come, runway 28 left, third line.
2 left, third line, United 887.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Hope everybody out there is doing very well. In this video I want to offer up a tutorial on how to calculate alternate minimums. If you're not familiar with that, it's just basically meaning the minimum weather requirements that an airport has to have in order for you to list it as an alternate for your destination. I'll also say you guys please bear with me. I am at home right now with my 2-year-old daughter, so if you hear some baby noises, that would be why. But currently right now she's playing in the other room, so it shouldn't be an issue, but you know, when you're a parent, things happen. But anyway, so move forward with the tutorial. Alright, so first things first, you need to figure out if you even need an alternate to begin with. Alright, so to find out whether or not we need an alternate, two things. One, if your flight time is over 6 hours, then you're required to have an alternate no matter what the weather is, period. If your flight time is less than 6 hours, then you can use the 1, 2, 3 rule to determine whether or not you're required to have an alternate or not. Alright, so with that said, 1, 2, 3, the 1 stands for 1 hour before and 1 hour after your ETA. The 2 is the weather has to be any overcast or broken ceiling has to be at least 2,000 feet or higher. And 3 is your visibility has to be at least 3 statute miles or greater. If you meet these requirements, then you do not need an alternate. So for example, this is LA's TAF right now. If you were getting in at 21Z, the 1 hour before and after would mean that we're expecting a broken 2,400 foot ceiling, scattered 25, and greater than 6 statute miles. So in that scenario, you would not need an alternate. However, if you were getting in at say 5Z, then you would need an alternate because you have an overcast ceiling of 1,500 feet, and that is lower than your required 2,000 feet. So you have a broken or overcast ceiling that is lower than 2,000 feet. The visibility is fine, but the ceiling causes you to have to list an alternate from a legal perspective. So that's how you determine whether or not you need an alternate to begin with. So let's see, calculating alternate minimums. It's really not that hard to do, but you know, there might be people out there that's not aware of how to do it. So I thought I'd give my opinions, or should I say, the way I calculate alternate mins. So I'm gonna keep it, simple. You don't calculate alternate minimums unless you're using a straight-in precision approach. A precision approach would be an ILS approach or localizer. You could also use a VOR, but typically airlines don't use those because the minimums would be so high. So a lot of times, you just end up using the ILS. So for any case, let's say you're going to, I don't know, Los Angeles International, and you want to use Ontario as an alternate. So go open up the JEP charts here. At least that's what I use. But most charting, it's all the same. The minimums are listed on the approaches. So this is Ontario. It's what I intend to use for my alternates. First, you want to figure out what direction the winds will be blowing. What runway is going to be your favorable direction, and what approaches will be available to you based on those winds. Now, if you don't exceed your maximum tailwind for any of the runways, then you can use them all. But if the winds are going to be so high that some of those approaches won't be usable because it busts your maximum tailwind, then you want to stay away from those and use the ones that won't. So let's pretend in this scenario that the winds are 270 at 20 is what we're expecting at our ETA. Then that would mean 8 left would be you bust your maximum tailwind on that. So I wouldn't use 8 left. It would be something I wouldn't utilize. So looking at 26 left, if we go into the charts here, I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in on the minimum section here. All right, there we go. All right, let's grab it. All right, so here we go. Cat 1 right here, it's showing 200 feet for the decision height and a half a mile for the minimums on the visibility. So this is for full. That's assuming that all your navigation or excuse me, all your lighting systems are working and everything's fully functional. You would use the full. And within a flight simulator environment, typically that would be true. All of your stuff would be working. So in order to calculate the alternate minimums, if you're using one approach, now granted I do have 2.6 left and 2.6 right, so that's two approaches that would be available to me. So if I'm using both of these approaches, then I would need to add 200 feet and a half a mile to the highest of the two limitations. So looking at 2.6 right here. Bear with me here a second. It's going haywire. Come on. All right, here we go. Finally got it under control. All right, so looking at 2.6 right, minimums are 200 feet and a half a mile. So they're the same for both. So when I add my buffer, my required buffer for two different approaches, all right, I would add 200 to this, which gives me 400, and I would add a half a mile to this, which will give me 1 mile. And that would mean that the weather requirements for Ontario at my ETA would have to at least be 400 feet and 1 mile. Now, on the other hand, let's say I only had one approach to use for planning, and I'll tell you how you know you have two different approaches. Here's your identifier, which is India Oscar November Tango. The identifier has to be different. That's how you know you're having two independent approaches. So here it's India Tango Whiskey Oscar. So 2.6 left and right are not utilizing the same navigational system. That's how you are able to differentiate if you have one or two. Now let's assume I only had one. Let's say either 2.6 right didn't exist or it was out of service. Sometimes things are noted out of service. Granted, in the flight simulator environment, that's usually not the case, but in the real world, a lot of times ILSs are out of service. So just for the sake of demonstrating how you would do this if you had only one approach, let's pretend 2.6 right is out of service. So I only have 2.6 left, right, because 8 left isn't available because the tailwind is going to be too strong. So zooming back in on the minimum section here a moment. Alright, so Cat 1, 200 and a half. Since I only have one approach available to me, then I would be required to add 400 and a mile. So that means if I add 400 to this, I get 600 feet. And if I add a mile to this, I get a mile and a half. So that means the minimums at Ontario, the minimum weather requirements for the ETA at Ontario, or excuse me, for LA, at that ETA, Ontario's weather has to be at least a 600 overcast or broken ceiling and at least a mile and a half on the visibility. All right, so scattered and few is not a ceiling. So you can have whatever on the scattered and few, but your broken and overcast, those are considered ceilings, and you have to have at least 600 a mile and a half because I'm using one ILS approach. So that is the basics to how you calculate alternate minimums. I mean, really, it wouldn't get too much more in depth than that for a flight sim environment. You are not allowed, at least in the United States, you're not allowed to use RNAV approaches. Those aren't authorized. Some airlines do have OPSPECS agreements with the FAA that allows them to use RNAV approaches, but those, that's getting into some more nuances. And that's airline specific, but as far as just straight regulations are concerned, that is how you calculate your alternate minimums. All right, well, I hope that helped. I hope it didn't confuse anybody. Feel free to, ask questions in the comment section if something was kind of vague or, or something I said, you didn't understand. I guess until next time, thanks for listening and thanks for watching. So long.